Tell me your story.
Tell me your story.
How did it all start? Do you remember?
Oh, now what happened? How did it start?
This is Small Business Origins.
Yeah, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Small Business Origins. I'm your host, as always, John Kelly, a.k.a. John the Marketer on Instagram and TikTok. And you're tuned in to our nationwide search. We're looking for entrepreneurs who have a story to tell. And joining us virtually today from New York City, I've got Shaun Eli. He is with the Ivy League of Comedy. Shaun, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Lovely to be here. And I'm not virtual. I'm actually right behind you.
I can see you in my reflection here. We are here to talk about your origin story, where you came from, and what kind of cool stuff you're into. But we always start out with an icebreaker question. And today's icebreaker question, this is super serious. So you're going to have to put your thinking cap on, and we're going to get real deep here. If you could eliminate one food so that no one could ever eat it again, what would it be?
Wow. I have a colleague and he wants to eliminate one song. And the song he chose is one of the most popular songs. If I could eliminate one food that I would never have to see or deal with again, mushrooms.
Ooh, yeah.
Don't like mushrooms. I think they're creepy.
I'm kind of weird. I like some mushroom flavored stuff, but I don't like mushrooms either. It's the texture for me. It's just weird.
Yeah.
I don't hate it, but it's not my favorite. And my wife hates when I say not my favorite.
They're slimy. It's a bad texture.
This one for me, I would gladly destroy and eliminate, and I would be so happy about it. And it's broccoli. I cannot stand broccoli. It's so gross to me, and so many people in my life love it, and I don't understand why. I believe that they're possibly a little psychotic. If I wanted to eat a tree, I always tell people I would just chop it down and eat it, and that's what eating broccoli is like for me. It's just hard and crunchy,
but it saves you the trouble of chopping down a tree.
You know what? I would rather chop down a tree and eat it than eat broccoli. That is me. I'm not a broccoli fan. So yeah, that'd be the one I would eliminate.
I mean, I'm okay with broccoli, but not raw, because then it is kind of gross. But sometimes if you fry it or something, and it's in Chinese food, it's in a lot of foods. The thing is, you can avoid it. It's pretty easy to just not eat broccoli.
If you cook it up right and it's mixed in with a bunch of stuff like broccoli, rice, and cheese without huge, large chunks of broccoli, I'm okay. But just, dip it in some ranch and eat it. That's psychotic to me. I can't be friends with anyone who likes that. I don't know. It's just me.
I think you probably feel about broccoli like I feel about cauliflower. It just doesn't belong there.
See, now cauliflower, I got some recipes where you can kind of mash it up and make some really good stuff with it. But I'm definitely not a huge fan of it either. It reminds me of like just a white broccoli in my eyes. But yeah.
When I was a kid, a friend's mother cooked calf brain.
Ooh.
And after that, cauliflower reminds me of calf brains, and I don't want to eat brains.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's a weird one. Brain. I don't think I could eat that either. Well,
I don't think they serve it anymore because of mad cow. So you're safe.
Yeah, that was a super serious thing going around for a while too. But we're here to talk about you, Shaun. So let's just kind of hop right into it and tell me where you came from and how you got to where you're at now. What's your origin story?
Well, I don't want to creep you out, but I'm known as the broccoli of stand-up comedy.
All right. Well, we're just going to end the podcast there then. It was nice. I'm eliminating you from all of this.
I'm sorry. I'm the pizza of stand-up
comedy. See, now that I can support.
I worked in a corporate environment and threw it all away so I could be a stand-up comedian. That's the quickest synopsis I could give of my life. And it was probably the best decision I've ever made.
Yeah, I've heard a few stories from some comedians recently, and I don't know when you got into it, so maybe you may not relate to these people, but, some people kind of realize like, hey, with COVID and changing the way that we're doing everything, it was like, I've always loved stand-up comedy, and now's the time because I can hop in and connect with people virtually and, start doing this. And I love hearing those stories of like, I was doing a corporate job that I hated, and I'd always stuck around with stand-up comedy. And one person I follow in particular, Shelly Belly Comedy, she actually she has that exact story of like, my kids are grown. I did my job and I took care of my children. And then my husband told me like, why aren't you following your dream? If you always wanted to do comedy, why aren't you doing it? And she got into it really late. in her life, and is now super successful on that. So I love hearing these stories. So what kind of corporate job were you doing prior to comedy?
I was a banker, and a friend talked me into trying stand-up comedy, and I started performing at amateur shows and open mic nights and stuff like that. And I did some corporate shows here and there, and some fundraising shows. And after 6 years, I realized I basically had two jobs, and one was fun and didn't pay well, and one wasn't fun and paid well. And I made the non-economic decision of throwing away the lucrative one to have a much better quality of life. And now I tell people I probably use my alarm clock maybe 5 days a year. So seldom that every time I use it, I have to read the instruction manual to figure out how to set it.
Going back to eliminating something, I would love to eliminate the alarm clock in my life. So I'm jealous of you there. Banker.
Well, that's how we won World War II. People don't know this, but Colonel General von Snooze invented the snooze alarm in Germany, and they kept rolling over and going back to sleep, and that's why they lost the war.
See, that sounds like me. I would have lost the war. That's what I would have done. So a banker, I mean, that is, if I had to think of boring jobs, that sounds boring, probably very lucrative. I hear of a lot of people who make really good money doing that kind of stuff. You had basically two jobs. So you were waking up in the morning, going to work, and then afterwards going to do these open mic nights and just kind of, gig it out, if you will, and throw those things in on top.
Yeah. Right. And I realized I had two jobs, but one of the things I did shortly after I started in stand-up comedy, the way you get better is by getting on stage. And it's hard to find stage time because when you're new, you're not very good and nobody wants to put you on their stage. No comedy club is going to say, sure, you've been doing comedy for 6 weeks. We're going to have people pay to see you and see you suck. It doesn't work that way. So what people said is start producing your own shows. And I started producing shows, and I wanted a name that sounded very corporate and high end. So I called my company Ivy League Comedy. And then one day we showed up at a theater and they got the name wrong. And the marquee said the Ivy League of Comedy. And I saw that and said, that sounds better than what we have. And I changed it.
I love that. Yeah. Like, hey, thanks for the mess up. This works out pretty well.
Yeah. And they're out of business and I'm not. So I guess it worked better for me than for them.
Win. That's what they say on TikTok these days.
Yeah.
So how did you go from not making a whole lot of money on it to being able to support yourself?
A boatload of cold calling. I've called theater. I still do it. I've been doing this for 18 years and I still cold call, although I'm trying to cut back on it. So contacting charity organizations, houses of worship, corporations, and theaters. And mainly, most of my work is in theaters, and I look for theaters that don't already have stand-up comedy. Everybody is saying to me, oh, this theater has comedy, you should go talk to them. Like, no, they already are doing it. What I'm looking for is people who are not doing what I'm doing, because inevitably my show is probably going to be a lot better and a little more expensive than what they're already doing. So I'm looking for places to say, hey, we haven't done this, let's give it a try. The hardest thing is when a theater has already had a comedy show and it turned out to be terrible and they say, we're never doing that again. Those are the hard people to convince to hire me.
Yeah. I've got a venue just like that right here in Tomball, man. We need to get you to come out to Tomball, Texas and try out some comedy here, because that's exactly what they're doing. They're in the music space right now. And they have emailed me and they're like, hey, that comedian that you wanted to kind of refer over to us and we weren't doing comedy at the time, we're thinking about hopping into it. Do you have any comedians that, you would recommend? So it seems like this might be maybe a trend that's happening where a lot of places are trying to kind of jump over to the comedy space. And I don't see why not. I enjoy stand-up comedy myself. If we had a stand-up comedy place to go in Tomball, I would be at one all the time and spend way too much money. So I think it's a good business venture.
How big is your town, and how big is
this
the theater?
town? Is actually a pretty small town. I think last census we're somewhere around like 10 to 12,000 people total. It's not so much a theater. It is more of it's called Main Street Crossing. And it kind of started out as like a coffee cafe type place. They serve food and beverages now, a lot more than coffee. And I don't know what the seating looks like, but I'd imagine it would be a smaller venue, probably 100, 150 people or so. But they do some pretty mainstream stuff, man. It'd be cool to see you down here. But as far as these theaters, so you're just coming in and performing these shows and kind of doing like a rev share type thing then?
It depends on the venue. Obviously, I'd much prefer to just get a big fat check, but I will do what they call a door deal, a revenue share, or a fee plus back end based on how many people
Gotcha.
show up.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, but it depends. Generally, it's me plus one or two or three other comics. And for 100 or 150 seats, if I have to get on an airplane, it's just going to be a solo
Right.
show because there's not going to be enough money for me to fly two people down there and pay for two hotel rooms.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what type of
It's something-
comedy are you into? Is it clean? Is it explicit? Are there, a mix between, like, do you do different ones? I know you mentioned churches, so.
Yeah, I do shows at houses of worship pretty frequently. My comedy is clean with a disclaimer that every once in a while, if I'm doing a show in a comedy club where nobody cares about the cleanliness of content, I may curse here and there if it just fits what I'm talking about. But generally, my comedy, so my theater shows, I'm clean. Obviously, my charity and house of worship and corporate shows, I'm clean, and that's a huge advantage. That's a big marketing advantage because I would say probably 80 to 90% of professional stand-up comedians can't do a clean half hour. And I can do an hour and a half without cursing or talking about anything that would offend anybody.
And you may be biased on this because, it's your style, if you will, but I've actually heard that before because I'm a big connoisseur of stand-up comedians and I like it all. I respect 100% getting out there and being able to do a clean show and not get into explicit topics or using explicit language because in my opinion, and I think you may agree, I think it's harder to do that. It's harder to appeal to the masses and have a clean show that anybody can be a part of and enjoy from, 8 years old up to 80 years old versus just kind of that niching down into, the adult that's 21 plus, probably, 40, 50 years old on the high end that wants to hear the raunchy stuff, if you will.
Well, you say 8 to 80. First of all, I'd say, why are you limiting it on the top end? Because I perform for people close to 100
awesome.
years old. And I've done shows for seniors groups where the average age may be 85 years old.
Killer.
But I wouldn't say 8. And just because 8-year-olds are not going to be entertained by my jokes because they're not going to understand them. So they get bored and they get disruptive. So I say like 14 and up, just so they're adult enough to understand what I'm talking about.
But the point being, it's hard to kind of appeal to the masses and be able to do that clean stand-up routine because it's so easy to just throw some cuss words in there for no reason and kind of get a laugh out of people, I think.
Well, it's definitely if you cuss, you can get, laughs out of shock rather than humor. And if you have dirty jokes, people sometimes think they're funnier just because it's talking about something that's sort of forbidden. But I mean, my mind just doesn't write dirty jokes. Occasionally I think of something dirty that's funny and I write it down and then it just sits there because I don't do anything with it. But just that's not the way my mind works. But for a lot of people, that's just what they want to talk about. And it's unfortunate because in a comedy club, a comedian is a commodity. Unless you're famous, you're no different from the other guy. And in a corporate, if you can do a corporate event, you're going to make a lot of money. I just quoted a price for a law firm, and it was what a comedian would make for a weekend at a comedy club. And for me, it's just going to be probably fly in the morning, fly out, late in the day and make just as much money as a comic would for a weekend. And I'm not losing a weekend.
Yeah. That sounds terrible. Making more money for less work. Yeah. It's gotta be a
Isn't
horrible
it?
thing. I'm sure you told them no.
I said to them, if I have to fly in the day before, you're going to have to pay for a night in a hotel.
It's fair.
Because if they want me at 9, I don't want to be there at 9:00 in the morning, but if they want me at 9:00 in the morning, I'm obviously not flying in that morning. I'll have to fly in the day before.
I mean, I think what you said earlier kind of hits that point home of being able to do a clean show or, a combination of slightly adult show definitely helps you appeal to more people. I think it opens up, what you can do, like you said, corporate events and all of these things. I know we had the opportunity at a conference recently to see a very famous comedian at that conference. And, you know, it's because that comedian's able to come out and do something more on the clean side and focus on that. So that's really cool.
Well, I will say the very famous comedian got people to go to the conference and appreciate it. Not speaking about me, but about my colleagues. Every bit as funny as the famous person, maybe funnier, but a heck of a lot less expensive.
Save you a little bit of money, still get some really, you know, fun things to do. Kind of changes it up from your normal corporate event of icebreaker games and questions and doing some food and drinks, you know?
Yes. And it's especially, you know, after a day, and I have something on my website, brainchampagne.com, under corporate comedy, where I describe the reasons and the benefits of having a comedian at your conference. And there are actual tangible benefits, because people won't just have better memories and a better opinion of your conference. They actually remember things better because they laughed at the end of it.
Laughter is medicine, man. I think there's plenty of studies out there that show when you're enjoying yourself, it makes it more memorable, you know?
Right. Well, that's the thing. You're going to remember what you learned at the conference better if you had fun.
Every conference I go to, I definitely want to see y'all out there. That's for sure. So,
well, start talking to them about me.
I will add you to it. Like I said, man, I know, you know, it'd be a smaller thing out here, but I mean, we can definitely try and put you in touch with people. And that's why we have you on the show right now too. Hopefully someone's listening in the Houston area and is like, you know what? I might need to have this person on. So where are you at online? Are we able to go see some of your comedy online anywhere?
Oh, I am way all over the place online. My YouTube channel is Brain Champagne. I've been posting on Instagram, and then a colleague of mine said, just post videos on Instagram. So not, you know, just the kind of jokes I post on Facebook. So starting 2 weeks ago, I said I'm going to post regularly every week a new video, short video, on Instagram and Facebook. And then I was at a conference last week and I brought my tablet with me and I thought I posted and it didn't go up. So I put it up, I think yesterday or the day before. But I think I'm just going to post a new video every week. But my website, brainchampagne.com, and my YouTube channel, Brain Champagne, have a lot of videos. Plus, my website has about 50,000 words worth of jokes on it, original comedy. And if you don't know what 50,000 words is, a novel is about 100,000 words. So that's a lot of jokes.
So you've literally written the book on comedy.
I've written half of it.
Hey, you know what?
I wrote the good half.
There you go. You got the gold content in there. Now you just got to put all the filler words for the other 50,000. That's what it is.
I think it was Stephen Wright who said, I started writing a book. I've already filled in the page numbers. Now I just have to put the words in. And that's sort of how I feel.
That's awesome. So are you selling your work? Like, can we buy DVDs or anything like that?
Oh, perfect. Because my comedy special, and I'd forgotten about it, and it just happened like 6 days ago. My comedy special, The Ivy League of Comedy, is now on Amazon. Nice. And it's me plus 5 colleagues. It's stand-up comedy, plus there's a camera backstage so you can see what comics are talking about before and during a show, and Q&A with the audience. It's 90 minutes, and it's a lot of fun. And I will say, watch all the credits, because once the serious credits are done, we got phony credits.
You know, and I just dated myself, and you went right along with it and didn't say anything. So you're guilty by association.
DVD?
Yeah, I just
DVD,
I just realized I said that, and I'm like, bro. I mean, am I going to ask you next if you're publishing CDs and, you know, we're able to?
Well, people just said, you know what? I still have CDs. People talk about taping a show, and like, there's no tape. There's no tape. There's no
say
film.
That all the time. Yeah. And the other one that cracks me up too is, and our listeners will miss out, but maybe we'll have to make sure we release this as a little moment on social media, but show me your hand signal for talking on the phone.
Oh, yeah. It used to be this.
And now with the new kids.
But now I guess it's this.
Yeah.
Oh, because just got an earpiece.
So, well, they're holding the flat phone up to their ear, you know, instead of doing the whole almost like okay symbol, you know, and
but now when half the people talking on the phone, they're not holding anything to their ear. They're just pushing a button and they take the phone.
Yeah, that's all.
Actually, the thing that worries me most is most people talk on the phone like this.
That's true. At least I put it through my car though. That way, you know, I can talk hands free and be a little bit safer.
Oh yeah, it's worse. It's this. This is definitely worse.
Yeah,
Is
one-handed with the
driving
phone
like
up
this.
to your
But
ear. I know, it's crazy. But so we can find you digitally on Amazon and
yes,
order that, watch it, stream it directly to whatever device you want to watch it on. Definitely something I will probably do tonight. Talking about CDs, that's the funny part, is one of my very first, like, I had listened to stand-up comedians before, but like when I really started getting into stand-up comedy, one of the first pieces of media that I had from a comedian was Larry the Cable Guy on a CD. And I wore that CD out, man. I listened to the same stand up routine over and over again, and it never got dull to me. I always enjoyed showing it to my friends and stuff like that. And just what a world we live in where we can share these clips directly. And I know that'll help you tremendously if people would go online, like your content, share it with their friends, definitely start pushing that word around.
well, actually, John, you did something wrong, because speaking as the seller of content, I have to tell you, you didn't do it right. You're supposed to play the CD once, throw it out, buy another CD each time you play it. You're not supposed to play it
See,
twice.
I'm on that cost savings plan though. I'm trying to save money. Okay.
Goes to a good cause. Larry the Cable Guy, he really needs it.
He's living the poor life, man. He's just a poor country boy.
Well, I think he needs, he's got to up his clothing budget.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's listening right now, I'm sure, because, he's probably a big listener of my show, of course, because I'm just as famous as him. But, I'm sure we can help him out and maybe get him on the show and do a charity event for him.
I'm sure.
So what else are we finding on your website? Brainshampagne.com. When I go there, what all is on that website?
Oh, there is gobs of content on my website. As I said, there's $50,000 worth of 50,000 words, should be $50,000 worth of jokes. And it's, one-liner stuff. I used to write monologue jokes for late night TV. So there's a lot of that style of joke, 3 sentences as a joke. There's longer comedic essays. People have threatened to sue me here and there, and I respond to them with the most, don't pick a fight. There's an expression, if don't mess with the media, don't pick a fight with somebody who buys his ink by the barrel. And I say, do not pick a fight with a stand-up comedian, because you're going to be embarrassed. So a couple of times I've had legal skirmishes where I just beat the heck out of people. And so those letters are on my website. There's comedic essays, there's videos, there's information on how to hire a comedian, about corporate events, and my schedule. That's an important thing too, if you want to see me live.
Yeah. So do you kind of do like a tour then around the country?
I used to tour before the pandemic. I was touring all over the world. Since the pandemic, I've only been on an airplane twice, 4 times there and back. So basically I've been to 2 places, but I do intend to get back on airplanes and tour the US and the world relatively soon. But now I live in New York, so my shows are basically driving distances, almost everything I do. So like from Vermont to Virginia is where I've been the last couple of years. Cool. But I do intend to get back on airplanes. And if somebody wants to hire me for a corporate event or a theater, absolutely, I will get on an airplane. Man,
that's really, what a dream job. I wish that I had the gift of gab enough to do stand-up comedy. It's definitely something like I said, I've always enjoyed it, and I have my funny moments. People, they go in between calling me just an old man with my dad jokes to sometimes we'll be cry laughing so hard, but they just come few and far between. I can't figure out how it is that y'all put them together to run together funny to funny to funny in an hour and a half long.
It's work. I mean, it's not just being funny for an hour and a half spontaneously. Right. I mean, there are times I can be funny, and I think I'm pretty good at being funny spontaneously, but it wouldn't be an hour and a half of spontaneous funniness. But it's weird because I run into people who speak for a living, and they say to me, oh, I could never do what you do. I could never be funny. And I look at them and say, I could never do what you do. You have to be interesting. I don't have to be interesting. I don't have to make sense. I just have to make people laugh.
Yeah.
And to me, that's easier.
So talking about work, I know the answer to this. Otherwise, I'd have never invited you to be on a business podcast. But the listener may be wondering, like, how is it that a stand-up comedian can relate to business? Like, why are they on a business podcast? And I know anything that you do to pay your bills is a business. So if you would just kind of tell us some of the work that goes behind it, because I myself, I own a company. We do event services. So DJ, photo booth, live streaming, getting into photography, videography, that kind of stuff. And people say, well, how's that work? You know, you show up and 4 to 5 hours, you play music, you know, you're a human CD player. How does that work? And it's like, well, you didn't see all the behind the scenes stuff that goes into getting ready for that gig. The 4 hours we do that is just the fun part. The rest of it is work. So tell us what your average work day, if you will, looks like before you go on and perform.
You know, it's interesting to me. I was on the rowing team in college, and we have to transport boats and oars everywhere you go. And that's complicated. And I would look at the runners and the swimmers, and they don't have to carry anything, and I'd be jealous. And now as a comedian, I can show up just me. I don't have to carry anything with me. And I look at the musicians who have to lug equipment around. So it sort of reversed itself. But a typical day, as far as the work part of the day, I roll out of bed, you know, somewhere between 9 and 11 in the morning, which is, you say a luxury, but sometimes I'm not home till 3 o'clock in the morning. So it really depends. But a typical day is, you know, check my email. I have a list of people to call. I've got contracts to negotiate. As I said, there's still some cold calling. So it may be an hour or so of writing to theaters, following up about corporate events or charity events, working on new material. I do rehearse. It's something not every comedian does, but my goal is to rehearse for an hour and a half to 2 hours every day. And I would say fewer than half the days I actually get it done, but it's something I aspire to. And you think, well, that's not such a long day, but let's say I have a show in Delaware and I leave my house at 4 o'clock because I can't be late to a show. I have to build in time to change a flat tire or deal with a traffic jam. So if a place is 3 hours away, I've got to allow 4 hours for driving. So let's say I leave my house at 4 o'clock for an 8 o'clock show. The show's over by 10:15. I don't have to bring anything with me, but I do tend to carry a video camera and stuff. So to pack up, get paid, drive home. I may not be home till 1 o'clock in the morning. So that's a long day. So some days are long, and I probably work almost every day doing something. But some days it's just, you know, answering emails or going to a quick show.
And people don't realize too, and maybe I'm totally off base on this. I'm just kind of going based off of my podcasting experience and DJing experience and stuff like that. But the performance aspect of it takes a lot out of you. You know, when you get up there and you say, well, you're just talking for an hour and a half. It's like, no, you're not just talking. You're not just memorizing some jokes and just, you know, saying them out loud. You're reading the room. You're deciding, you know, what they're responding to, what they're not. You're making pivots in your brain if you need to, in order to kind of lead the comedy in a different direction if you have to. I mean, God forbid, we see the hecklers and stuff on TikTok all the time where maybe you got to deal with a heckler or somehow the crowd got involved. Now you've got to be involved in that. And it takes brain power. I would say you're still lugging around a lot of stuff. It's just you're lugging it around up here, where you're having to do all these things on the fly. And people don't realize reading people or an audience or a dance floor is a skill. And not everybody has that skill. So it takes some brain power there and it wears you out. To me, if I have a long day of podcasting, I can be exhausted at the end. And it's like, all you did was hop on a microphone and talk for a while. And it's like, yeah, but I thought about a lot of things.
Yeah. And I never thought about it until now, but you're right. A DJ is reading the room too and deciding what to play based on the people on the dance floor, which is something I never really thought about. I just assumed you showed up with your set list and you played your songs. But so it's sort of the same thing for me. And it really depends. If I'm doing a 10-minute set in a comedy club, I might have zero idea what I'm going to talk about until I take the stage. And it might be, I might start with talking about what the guy before me was talking about or what somebody in the audience said. If I'm doing a longer set, I have sort of a plan of what I'm doing. And sometimes I write down my set list, like these are the jokes I'm going to go through. Because if I'm doing a half hour or 45 minutes, which is typical, that's still not most of my material. So I have to decide what to talk about. And it is a performance. It's not just standing still and reciting into a mic, but I'm not, Chris Rock, who's, going back and forth. I'm not jumping all over the stage. So it's less physically exhausting. It can be a little mentally exhausting, but really the performing's the fun part. It's the negotiating and the business side of it and the marketing and updating my website and the cold calling and the driving to and from gigs. That's the tiring part. I perform for free if I didn't have to do all the other stuff
that you're doing behind the scenes when you got out of your corporate job.
Yeah, and also you mentioned hecklers. there's two things. One is if you do shows in theaters and charity events, you very rarely have hecklers. And also, you're seeing me right now. I'm in a dress shirt, and I don't think you can see it, but on the other side of that door behind me, I'm sitting in my office, is a sports jacket, and I'm going to an event tonight. And if you dress a little better than the other comedians, people don't talk back to you. So even if I were wearing boots and jeans and a polo shirt, and another comic is wearing sneakers and jeans and a t-shirt, they're going to talk back to him or her. They're not going to talk back to me. And it's something most comics haven't figured out. Just dress a little better and people treat you better. But even for, charity or theater or corporate events, about 7 or 8 years ago, a colleague took me aside and I thought I was dressed pretty nice. And he's like, your clothing isn't right for you. You need to dress better. And I looked into it and started dressing better for shows. And it's made a big difference.
Yeah, something I would have never thought of, for sure. So, hecklers are definitely a big deal. Are you one that kind of has any audience participation, or do you just solely present your material?
I do talk to depending on where the show is and what
Sure.
the event is. At a comedy club, if the other comics have been back and forth with the audience, then that's sort of expected that everybody does. And the comic who comes out and just recites their material is thought of as not as funny because they're not talking, they don't seem spontaneous. Yeah. But in a theater show, I might talk to the audience a little bit, especially at the beginning to sort of break the ice and get things started. I might say, if I have a story about a doctor, I might say, who are the doctors here? What kind of doctor are you? Talk to them about that a little bit and then segue into, material talking about doctors or lawyers or accountants or whatever I happen to be talking about. But you mentioned like a lot of heckler videos on TikTok. And I think that's a mistake my profession is making, because the more of that people are exposed to, the more they think that is appropriate behavior.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I agree with that. I do like controlled audience participation. I love it when a person a comedian is engaged with the audience in that way, but I respect both hustles, so it's not just, you have to be an audience participation type person or I'm not going to enjoy your show. I respect them both. I think the big thing is, and maybe this kind of leads to what you're saying about a mistake in the industry doing this, is that it's appropriate when the comedian makes it appropriate. And when it's not, it would be no different to me than disrespecting a chef by walking in his kitchen, and giving feedback on how he's cooking or something like that. It's like, they're there to do what they are doing. Let them lead it as a comedian. And if they want you involved, great, get involved respectfully. But if they don't want you involved, I think it's like the worst. It's a slap in the face to me. And while it does pop off as funny when a comedian truly shuts somebody down and really just craps all over them, and I love it, you're right, man. It kind of brings the profession down of like making everyone want to copy that and start doing that so they get their 15 seconds of fame.
Oh, I don't have a problem with the comedian doing it in the moment. What I have a problem with is when they post it on the internet. And then people say, oh, the comedian wants us to do this because they're having fun with it. And some comedians do have fun with it. But most of us would rather the audience their job is to enjoy the show, not to try to become part of the show. And a lot of times, it's drunks, or it's a guy on a date. And comedians learn very quickly how to read different kinds of hecklers, because you'll get the heckler who's drunk and doesn't realize it's actually not a conversation. And you'll get the guy who wants to prove he's annoyed that his date is laughing at this other guy and paying no attention to him. And he's going to prove I'm funnier than that guy. And that's a recipe for his disaster. Is. But also, a bachelorette party. It's a woman who's getting married and she's supposed to be the center of attention. And her friends are all around her. And it's, the second biggest day for her after her wedding day is the bachelorette party. And now all of a sudden, the whole bachelorette party is supposed to shut up and listen to this guy talk, or a woman. And they don't know how to deal with it. So they start interrupting. And you don't want to be mean to people if you don't have to. And frankly, it doesn't happen very often at corporate events. But if somebody interrupts at a corporate event, it's a lot harder because you can't use some of the techniques to shut them down because it's a corporate event. You can't be mean
they're
to
technically, related, if you will, to your paying customers. So I could see that. Yeah. I'm the type of person, much to my wife's dismay, that when we go to a comedy show, I want to sit right up front. And especially if it's an audience participation type thing where the comedian's going to pick on you or include you somehow, I love it because I love comedy. So I have no problem with that. I know that it's just comedy. My wife absolutely despises being the center of attention for that 15 seconds.
And that's the problem we have is your wife may be a good sport if somebody's picking on her, but we don't really know if she's enjoying it or she's just going along with it. And I've told comedians, and audiences often don't want to sit up front for that reason. I don't do any picking on the audience unless I'm very provoked. But some comedians just think it's funny to insult the audience. And when I've worked with newer comics, I say, the reason the club is half empty today is because yesterday you picked on the audience. And I've spoken to people and said, oh, do you go to comedy shows? And a very common response is, I used to go all the time, and then the comedian picked on me or my friend, and I never went back. And what profession is it appropriate to abuse your customer base?
See, and it's hard for me because I love it. I think it's funny. But you're right. Like, I can see the big problem that it's creating there. I can't disagree with you at all. I just kind of wish people would have thicker skin these days and be okay with it. You hear a lot of complaining. Are you familiar with like the cruise industry and their stand-up comedy stuff? And
they're way sensitive.
Those cruisers.
And people go, I've only heard the comedian side of the story, so I've never heard the audience or the cruise line side of the story, but comics seem to get fired a lot.
Yeah. And I don't know that part of it. But I definitely know from the cruisers' perspective, the cruise lines make it very, very clear when it is a clean show that children are allowed to attend. And by children, I mean anyone under 18 years old. Or when it is an adult only show and you must be 18 or older to attend. And people just lose their mind. They cannot imagine a world where it's okay to be offensive in comedy. And even when they're prepped and they know, and then the host of the comedy club comes out and says, hey, just a reminder, if you get easily offended or you don't like harsh language or explicit topics, you may want to get up and leave. No problem. We love you. We understand. You're just in the wrong place. And then even after all of that, the comedian will say something and I'm over there dying laughing and someone's offended and walking out. And I'm like, how did you get to this point when you hear all the morning?
Well, you don't know what they're going to say. You don't know you could say I have a thick skin and then they hit the one point that you're sensitive on.
Sure.
Nobody
and you know
knows.
What I would do at that point? Not that it's ever happened. Stand up respectfully and leave. I'm not happy with it. I don't like it. I don't enjoy it. I'm going to go drink somewhere, or I'm going to go, play trivia or whatever else. But I think we have like a sense of entitlement of like, well, you can't say this because I don't like it.
Well, and how do we know that, a comedian is talking about having a skin rash and you have some skin disease and it makes you really upset? It's impossible for us to know that. I mean, I got lucky once. I was doing a charity event and I had a new joke about basically the theme of the joke is that drunk driving isn't dangerous as long as there's people texting. They're way scarier. and I don't even remember the joke anymore, but I show up and I'm ready to do the joke. And a person happens to say to me, I'm glad we have a comedy show tonight. We're all a little sad because one of our beloved members died in a motorcycle accident this morning. And had I done that joke, they would have been horrified, but you have no way of knowing. I just got lucky that they happened to mention it to me and I didn't tell the joke.
Scratch that out.
But it could have been horrible and it wouldn't have been anybody's fault. Just stuff happens.
That's how I feel about it. Yeah, I haven't been offended yet, but I've been directly picked on.
You with that face,
That's
you
what
haven't
I'm
been
saying.
offended
See,
yet?
I've been picked on for my face. I've been called fat at a comedy show. I've been all kinds of things. And I think to me, it's just hilarious. Like,
yeah, but most people would probably be pretty
you're
upset.
right. I'm not most people, that's for sure. So is it okay to ask you if you have like a favorite joke or something that you can do for us?
Favorite joke I can do?
Or maybe like your most successful joke recently, or just something that you like to do?
My most successful joke is like 3 minutes long, but one of the favorite jokes I've written is, and it's a good corporate event kind of joke, is I talk about when I'm driving to the show and I say, you remember that the Supreme Court decided that corporations are the same as people. You remember this? So on the drive here, I threw 2 stock certificates into the passenger seat, drove here in the carpool lane.
Yeah. Why not?
Didn't make you laugh, but
and I'll tell you too, man. First of all, I put you on the spot, and that's to me, if you can navigate that as a comedian, that's hard. I found it funny for sure. I think it's a good joke. I relate it to other people who've done some crazy things on the HOV, like the pregnant woman who said, well, I've got 2 people, so I'm going to challenge this, Yeah. But it's hard too, doing jokes virtually where you have no reaction from an audience. I think it would probably definitely be easier to do comedy for a large audience and get that laugh, and everyone's in the same mood and feeding off of each other. Hey, my producer laughed.
By the way, if I were a cop and I pulled over a pregnant woman in the HOV lane and she said, no, my fetus is a baby, so we count as 2 people, I would cite her for having the kid not in a seatbelt, in a child seat.
See, I like that. Hell yeah. That way. I mean, you're the one counting it, ma'am.
Yep. And okay, so you want something else. So, they say the car that you drive reflects your sexuality. You think it's true? Because I drive my mom's car.
See, look at there.
That used to be my opening joke.
Man. I love it. Brainchampagne.com. We can find all of your comedy. Yes. Amazon. We can go on there, find your stuff.
The Ivy League of Comedy, live from the Emlyn Theater on Amazon.
Yeah, I love it, man. And so I always ask everybody when we start getting toward the end of the show, obviously, call you up, email you, and book you for a show. You'd love it. Buy a ticket to one of your shows you have posted. You would love that too. But if I'm just a broke dude sitting at home and I've got no way to support you, what's the best thing I can do to help you get out there?
Sign up for my email list. It's free. You can find the link on brainchampagne.com. And every month I will send you original comedy and stories from the world of stand-up, and you will get free jokes.
Perfect.
And then since you will be a better person from reading my jokes, you will be more successful and richer, and you will be able to hire me to come do a show for you, all just because you signed up for my mailing list. I swear that happens.
Quick, and honestly, if we send you like $1,000 or something to just boost this, it'll probably come back tenfold. I mean, that's not FDA approved, but I think it's true.
Don't feel the need to send me money. You could give it to charity.
Absolutely. No, I think it was a great conversation. Thank you for being on the show, Shaun. It truly was a good conversation. I think you're probably one of the first like sarcastic, funny, throw it back at me type people I've had on the show. I've had a few moments where,
well, you deserve it.
Honestly, I don't, you know what? I think I don't deserve it, and that's why I deserve it more. So I can't be good enough to deserve it. That's giving me credit.
Well, if you want to have imposter syndrome, I'm not going to stand in your way.
Well, there you have it, folks. Brainchampagne.com, the Ivy League of comedy. Shaun Eli himself right here. Hire him out. Get him to a theater near you. Pay him enough to fly out there and do a private show for you, or see one of his shows up in New York next time you're in that area. Please go out there and support him just like you supported him by listening to this show. I really appreciate our listeners and our viewers for tuning in every single week for a new episode of Small Business Origins. Shaun, it's been my pleasure to interview you. Thanks again for coming on the show. And listeners, we will see you on the next episode. And as always, stay beefy, my friends.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Small Business Origins.
I love an origin story.
If you like what you just heard, leave us a review, subscribe, and share with a friend.
You guys, check this out.
They're going to love it. You're going to love it.